Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to this edition, the special edition of Speaker's Corner. We're really doing a lot of webinars this month with an effort to attempt to keep you informed and let you know about really current topics. And I was thinking about a lot of us are struggling with our clients having to sell their homes as a result of a separation and really worrying about mortgage approval, and how to get funding to purchase a house during these really uncertain times. So I've called upon old friends and colleagues for assistance, and I'm really happy to welcome Jody and Janet Thompson from Thompson Sells, real estate agents with over 10 years experience. And really what they've managed to do is have a background in technology and really bring it forward. So they've made a real shift into the real estate world with a wealth of knowledge in the technology world. So they've got some really cool ideas of how to buy and sell houses during COVID-19, and I'm excited for you to see what some of those are. And then we have John, I'm going to get your name wrong, Panagakos. Okay, I can't hear you again, but
Panagakos.
Panagakos. Okay, darn.
Yeah.
And you're a fellow. Last name starts with P and is a little difficult to say, and somehow I always mince that one. My apologies to you, John. John has a company called Separation Mortgages. He's a friend of OAFM. He's come on a number of times, and some of you have seen him speak before. He's got some information for you specific to how to qualify for mortgages in COVID-19, good tips and advice. And John, how long have you been a mortgage broker?
10 years.
10 years, okay. So we've got 20 years real estate and mortgage broker experience here. And I've been a mediator for 15 years. And today we have my son, Simon Popescu, on as the moderator, and he's going to be sending me the questions that you have. There is time for questions at the end of each presentation. Jody and Janet are going to speak first, and then you can ask the questions along the way. Simon will moderate and send me the questions along the way. So feel free to use the chat box at any time. And then we're going to turn it over to John, and same sort of format. He's going to do a little presentation and then questions and answers. And really we can have joint questions too, because I think these topics really go hand in hand, and I'm looking forward to the chat as well. So welcome to everyone. And over to you, Janet and Jody.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Marianne, for the opportunity to present to your group. When COVID-19 first arrived in mid-March, we were in the midst of one of the most active real estate markets in history. With plenty of motivated buyers and others that had to sell, we continued to have good sales throughout March. Things began to change very rapidly. Today, we're certainly dealing in a turbulent and uncertain times in the real estate market. Our goal this afternoon is to update on what's happened and how best to navigate through these tough times. Homes are selling, but at a much slower rate. There will always be people that need to buy or sell their homes. For example, clients that have sold their property before the pandemic and need to buy a property so they aren't homeless. Others need to move into a senior's home, or maybe perhaps they're getting divorced and it's healthy to move into a separate quarters. Our government recognized that will be people that need to move during this period. As a result, real estate was deemed an essential service. This allows people that need to buy, sell, the opportunity to do so.
There are lots and lots of dreadful headlines out there about the real estate market and what's happening in the real estate market. And what I thought I would do is share with you a few of the facts. So this is a snapshot of the Etobicoke market between March 28th and April 28th. And even though it doesn't represent all of GTA, the stats for GTA are very similar. And you can see in this that we've gone through a bit of a pause in the number of houses that have sold this year relative to the same period last year. Home sales are down 68% in the housing market, and they're down 69% in the condo market. So a pretty big drop in sales volume. Having said that, contrary to some of the headlines that you read, the housing prices have not really dropped since, compared to a year ago. The housing market is up about 3% and the condo market is up about 9%. One of the stats that we look at and we watch very closely is the number of homes on the market relative to the number of homes that have sold. And this ratio is a really good indication on whether we're in a buyer market, a seller market, or a balanced market. Earlier in the year, we definitely were in a very strong seller's market. It's now moved to more of a balanced market, and it is trending towards a seller's market.
A buyer's market.
Sorry, a buyer's market. Buying and selling during these times is definitely different. And, buyers and sellers and real estate agents have really had to adopt to the time. And these are just some examples of some of the things that we're doing that are different than we would have done in the past. In some instances, we're starting with what we're calling is a timing consultation. And really what this is just a discussion with our clients and really understanding what their motive is to buy or sell, and is the time right for them. Often we're encouraging and recommending that they don't buy and sell now, and that they kind of take a pause and wait for a more of a normal state to arrive. But as Jody mentioned, that there are people that do have to buy and sell, and for those we certainly are supporting them. We are practicing social distancing, which means that a lot of the interactions that we're having with our suppliers, our clients, buyers and sellers and other realtors out there are happening virtually using video conferencing and the good old-fashioned telephone. There also is a lot of really, really good technology out there to support our business. And here's just a couple of examples on some of the things that we're doing virtually, things that we would have done in person. For example, a home evaluation. Instead of sitting across the kitchen table with a client and talking about what the value of their home is, we're doing that virtually. We're also doing buyer consultations where we're exploring, how much can a buyer afford and what are the right neighborhoods and how we're going to start their search. Our stager, Sue, is actually doing virtual staging consultations and using things like FaceTime with clients where they're actually walking around the house, showing her their property, and she's making recommendations on where they need to declutter, how the furniture may be rearranged and how to best accessorize the home to make it look great for photography. In some instances, we're actually doing virtual staging. We just did a property that was an empty condo, and buyers really have difficulty with space when something is empty. So what this allowed the buyers to see is to kind of visualize how you would, arrange the furniture in the condo. Virtual renovations really takes it to a whole nother level. And this is where we take a property that may be tired and we show what it could look like with a cosmetic renovation. Many clients, just when they walk into an older home, they have great difficulty really visualizing what you could do with the property. So in summary, we definitely have adapted, our ways with the times. When you go to sell your property, regardless of during a pandemic or when it is, there really are three phases that you go through. And we call them the 3 Ps: preparing your home for the market, pricing your home to maximize your returns, and promoting it to the right buyers. These have not changed with the time, but if we take a deep dive at each of these 3 phases, there are some differences. Right now, for example, there is a real heightened awareness on cleanliness. People want to go into a home, if they are going to go into a home that's super clean. So we do have cleaners on standby that are taking the extra precautions and doing the clean before we put the homes on the market. many buyers actually prefer to go into a vacant home. And so, you know, if you are thinking of putting your home on the market during these times, it is ideal that you have another place that you can go during the showing period. And finally, I am going to show you, we're pretty excited about the virtual renovation, one that we've done fairly recently. This is, this house actually was a home that was owned by the same family for 50 years. It happens to be in an Etobicoke neighborhood called Sunny Lee. And the home had great bones in a great neighborhood. But as you can see in the before shots, it was pretty tired. It is pretty tired and definitely in need of a renovation. So what we did was we did what we call a virtual renovation using some pretty sophisticated software. And in the top left-hand corner here, you see the kitchen as it looks right now. And you can see the dated appliances and countertops and lovely wallpaper on the wall. And below that, you see, without really even changing the layout of the room, what it looks like renovated. And then on the right-hand side, you see the same for the living room. The top is what the home actually looks like right now, and the bottom is with a virtual renovation. And we actually take it a step farther. We not only show what the property could look like with a cosmetic renovation, we also give the clients the price that the cost of doing that renovation. And it's pretty cool software, and we certainly have we haven't sold this property yet, but we certainly have gotten
Tons of interest.
Yeah, tons of interest and good feedback, both from the buyers, because they can walk in and go, okay, I get it. I can see what you could do with this property, as opposed to walking in and saying, oh, geez, it just looks like my grandma's house. So hopefully, you know, we have an opportunity to do more of these, but it definitely is a very, very cool and kind of latest application. Second of the 3 Ps is really pricing. And in any market, it's really, really important that you price your home correctly. If you overprice it, the wrong buyers see your property, and you really only help sell the competition. During the pandemic, market pricing may change quicker than we're really accustomed to. And so it's even more important that you price at the market. And, you know, really prices that were a month ago or 6 months ago are really irrelevant. And we need to make sure that when we bring properties out on the market right now, that they are priced at the current market. When you take a look at how to promote the property, it's never good enough really just to put your home on MLS and hope that it sells. The reality is most buyers start their search online. So having a really, really strong digital strategy is critical. And these days, with, you know, people not really wanting to go in as many houses, it's even more important. With the elimination of open houses, again, it just becomes very, very critical that when you're promoting your property, that you've got a very, very strong digital strategy. Here's some realities of, you know, when you do put your home on the market and that we start to have buyers come through, we do go to pretty great lengths to make sure that we screen the buyers, to make sure that they are qualified buyers, that they're looking for a property like yours, and that they are ready to buy. We then take extra precautions to make sure, you know, that we're really maintaining the safety of the buyers and the sellers. And the objective is really to reduce the touch as people walk through the home. We ask that the lights are turned on, doorways are opened, and that you can walk through really without touching any surfaces. And then the things are super clean. Lock boxes and door handles are clean prior to the showings and after the showings. Open houses have really, as we mentioned, have been eliminated. So there's no more than one buyer group in the home at any one time. And then finally, when a buyer is ready to purchase your home, it's really important to note that the whole transaction can be done electronically. So when you're selecting a real estate agent, it's important that you select one that embraces electronic signing and a lawyer that does digital closings. Okay, Jody, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, we have lots of experience dealing with many couples that have made the decision to go in their separate ways. Our job in representing you and act as your advocate through the sale of your home. We ensure that any info shared with us is strictly confidential, and under no circumstance will any buyers or other agents know about your situation. And in summary, remember, real estate has been designated as an essential service, and there is a way to move if that makes sense to you. We're here to help with anyone that needs to move in these difficult times. And with that, I'd like to thank you all and like to turn the floor.
Actually, open it up for questions.
I'll open up to floor for questions. Sorry, I'll turn it over to you, Marianne.
Okay, thanks. All right. So the one question I had, I don't think there's any questions so far in the chat, but when we were talking earlier, the idea of the confidentiality of separating couples, can you talk a little bit about what it's like and how you're able to keep confidence between partners? Because sometimes that's interesting, because as mediators, we're neutral. And I think as real estate agents with separating couples, you also play this neutral role.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we kind of work with each person in a different way, and we keep their lives separate as much as possible, and we're act as mediators ourselves at times, and we don't disclose any information about where we bought for both clients in the past. We did one recently where they used us for the buy as well. We don't disclose any of that information as to where the other partner is moving their lives. So
it's interesting in some situations, we're selling one home, but it's like you're dealing with two sellers.
Yeah.
And buying a property, it's like we're dealing with, we obviously are dealing with two separates. And as Jody said, it's, we've had situations where, for whatever reason, they didn't want the other to know where they were moving to. And that information was kept, strictly confidential.
And we're finding that with electronic signing, it's made life a lot easier for us. If they don't want to get together to sign physically, which had to happen in the past where we'd go to each other homes. We now can do it we use a program called DocuSign for electronic signature.
We ran a offer night where, where we had multiple offers on a property of a couple that was getting divorced, and we did it actually all virtually. So even though the offers came in, we sat in our RE/MAX office and then, communicated to each of them.
In other cities,
they were actually in different cities, and we handled it and came to an agreement on what we were going to do with the sign back without them having to be in the same room. So there's a lot you can do right now.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder how much of those practices, especially where you've got highly conflictual couples who maybe, there's a history of domestic violence between the two of them, or something, that you just have this feeling, as real estate agents, you're not doing a domestic violence screening per se, but I imagine there's cases where, like something is really, really wrong, and there's a definite power imbalance with, between even married couples, I think, have power imbalance.
Yes.
Separating couples, there's that extra layer, and there's a couple of questions, but I just want to hear from you on that first, and then I'll ask the questions.
We find each situation's different, and we have to, treat it very delicately, and
Yeah, it must be. I mean, when we at OAFM, when we looked at standards and we looked at experience, like work experience, we did include real estate as a valuable work experience and recognition of the real, play you have to do between families, even with married families, how you have to sort of manage both partners' expectations. So we did really value real estate agents and mortgage brokers, financial professionals experience. Both of you have, a lot of the chops that, we're looking for in mediators. So another career for the next 10 years. The best, one participant asked, what's the best timing when being concerned about the price is so unclear? should sellers be waiting until after COVID, or is now still ideal? And that probably depends on where you live, I imagine, right? Like,
yeah, and I mean, that's an excellent question, and there isn't really a single answer. It really depends on the situation. I mean, we went through at the beginning of COVID where there was just like this huge pause in the market, and to be honest, there weren't a lot of houses that were, you know, turning hands. Buyers now seem to be coming out more, and you know, with the extra precautions, you can sell your house, but nobody has a crystal ball. And so, you know, we say when the timing is right for you to sell. We don't know whether, you know, there's going to be a significant drop in real estate prices, you know, as we go through the next 6 months. So it's really best, you know, when the timing is right for you to put your home on the market.
Right.
and this is an appraisal question, but you might know it is, can appraisers go into houses to determine the property value? And are you seeing that, you know, are people trusting you with the value that you give them to their home, or are you seeing more and more people asking for more agents' opinions or more appraisals on the home?
Yeah, there are, you know, it depends on the situation. Some appraisers will do the appraisal just by looking at the drive-by. You know, we had a situation just last week where Jody got a call from the appraisal, who quite frankly thought the price had gone down since they had, you know, they had signed the contract to when it was supposed to be closing. And, you know, Jody was able to give them comparables to show that, you know, the price was still okay and the appraisal did go through. But that is one of the biggest concerns out there right now with long closings, to be honest. If prices, you know, if you sign, you know, you're a seller, you sell your house, and at the time it's appraised at X, and if it's a long closing, that may change, and you know, the buyer may have difficulty getting the financing. So in these times, we are recommending the shorter the close that you can get, the better.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what about, there's a question, what's the prices like this year, like this time this year to last year? Are we up, are we down, and you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, it was sort of really on the upswing. So last April, were prices the same as they are this April?
Yeah, so that first chart really, it shows that the housing market is actually up for, if you were to compare April this year to April last year, it's up about 3%, and the condo market is up 9%. So what happened was, you know, prices kept going up through 2018, and in the first 2 months of 2019, they went much higher. And so they have come down a little bit from where they were in January, February, but if you compare it to a year ago, they still are up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Overall. And then can anyone sell a home during this pandemic, or do you have to be in a certain situation, like to be determined an essential service?
No, anyone can, as far as I know, and maybe John, you could input on that if you'd heard anything different. But as far as I'm aware, if they, you know, they prefer that it's a more an urgent situation, but it's there's no mandate there for that.
No, anybody can sell. It's really whether the time is right for you, right? And that's what you have to determine. But there's no governing body or the government that says yes, you qualify, you don't. Right. It just really is, you know, if you don't have to sell, it may be beneficial to kind of pause and wait till things return to a more normal state, right?
And we see as the weather gets warmer, you know, things are starting to open up. We've even seen them over the last week or 10 days, showings are ramping up again. People are coming out.
Yeah.
And so it's starting to change again.
Yeah, like you got to remember that, you know, up until about March 12th, we were in a record-breaking year. So there were so many buyers out there looking to buy at that point in time.
And
so, you know, we really believe once things sort of settle down a little bit, and as Jody said, we're already starting to see it. So with the listings that we have, there's more buyers that are coming out to have a look than there would have been, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where people were just saying, I don't want to go out, right?
Right. Yeah, people are getting more hopeful. And then what about those who are purchasing in their own name for the first time? Do you have any, so there's not a chain there. Do you have any recommendations for how they would prepare to buy a house right now?
Well, certainly making sure they can secure the financing, and John will be able to talk an awful lot more about that, right? But you know, we always, when people are buying a home for the first time, one of the first steps is really to understand how much you can afford. And with the help of a mortgage broker, that's the best way to do that, because once you know how much you can afford, then we're in a situation that we can make sure we're showing you properties that are appropriate for your budget.
Okay. Okay, good advice. Well, it's sort of, that's a lovely bridge, and look, there's a picture of a bridge on your over to John, and I'm, to answer and give more detail and fill in about financing during this time. I think if you stop sharing your screen now, then John, you can potentially start sharing your screen. Just let's see if I've given you that. Yeah, you should be allowed to share your screen. Do you want to hover over the bottom and see if you, yeah, there you go. And you're muted, so I'll let you unmute yourself, and if you can't, put your hand up and we'll help you.
Hey, how are you?
Okay, good. Excellent.
Good.
Thanks, Jody and Janet, too. I don't know if I said that, but thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. You can stay on, and yeah.
That was a wonderful presentation, Jody and Janet. That was good. For those of you that don't know me, I'm John Panagakos. This is my COVID beard. This is week 6 or 7. So those of you that are basketball fans, Google James Harden from the Houston Rockets. He's got this big bushy beard, and that's what I'm going to try and do, just, but way better. And I don't play basketball, unfortunately. However, this is my presentation. Although I am a mortgage broker, I feel like I'm in meetings day in, day out with various bankers and lenders and real estate agents, and now the OAFM again, which I'm more than happy to do, by the way, and everyone else trying to figure out what's going on in this crazy world. So I thought that I'm a big Seinfeld buff, so I thought Bizarro World, oh no, what's next, would be the perfect title to this presentation. So I have a few quick slides. I try not to predict what the future is by any stretch of the imagination. I just kind of go on data and what in my sort of thinking groups, what we've come up with, and we try and forecast but not predict. And I know that's a bit of an oxymoron, but this is who I am. I'm a mortgage broker specific to separation and divorce. Yes, we do all that regular stuff, but I would say about 90% of my business is separation and divorce work. So today's agenda, it's really interesting. Introduction, who I am, government pros. Yes, there are government pros. Lending moving forward and using a mortgage broker, and why. And then any questions anyone has, I'm always happy to answer them. So this is who I am. I'm a mortgage broker. I'm also a contributor for LexisNexis. So those of you that subscribe to LexisNexis, I'm a writer in their family law module series. I'm collaboratively trained in the Durham group. And I've also written a book called Mortgages, Your Personal Guide. So that's a very helpful resource for a lot of people. So government pros. So what we saw, I want to say about 7 weeks ago. So the government came out with about 6 months of deferrals for the banks, right? So the banks have now said, hey, you know what, you're unemployed, or you're on EI, or you're now allowed to get what's called the CERB. Don't worry about, in not so many words, but don't worry about paying your mortgage as long as you can pick up the phone and get through to us. So that's really has helped the housing market for housing market and mortgage holders for that matter, because there's no immediate need to sell. And I think that's a big pro. The government is also providing lots of liquidity to business and other entities, meaning if you're a small business owner, you can qualify for the CERB, which is that $2,000 a month credit. You can also apply for that $40,000 line of credit. There's also now, I think for commercial tenants, there's a 75% almost discount on your rent. We'll call it a discount. So that's some things that the government has done to help a lot of people. They've also decreased what's their prime rates or their over lending rates to almost near zero rates. What this has done is put a lot more confidence into consumers. So rates are low, generally speaking, and they will be low for the foreseeable future. We should see fixed rates continue to plummet. And I say this for a variety of reasons, including in our next slide or our next two slides, we'll dive deep into that. There is a rumor that that the government will allow about 1 million new immigrants into the country. We're just not sure when, that have a minimum of $1 million in investable assets. This is one resource that they're looking at to help the economy and to help the housing market. I'm very pro-housing, I will say that. There's a reason for it. I'm in the business and I own a few. So this to me is good news, because what that does is it brings more buyers and it brings more people into the country that have a sizable network to pump up the economy. CMHC has also decided that they are going to spend up to about $150 billion to purchase mortgage-backed securities. This will add further liquidity into the banks and allow the banking system to continue to grow and move forward. This is another big announcement that the government made probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago. There's no silver bullet to this, at least I don't think so. I don't think there's a silver bullet to anything. I think that many different things that the government is doing is going to help both the economy and the housing and mortgage market move forward. So I think that there should be a lot of confidence. I know it's not easy to have a lot of confidence right now because most of us are isolating, if not everyone's isolating, and isolating is not easy. I can understand that because I'm also going crazy. And I need a haircut, by the way. This is terrible. God, I don't go out every day. Like my neighbors would just shriek. But there are plans already. I want to say loose plans to open up the economy again, right? So I think there's like a 3-point phase plan that they're going to roll out soon, which is good for everybody. In terms of housing, I think the longer we stay isolated, the worse it is for housing, and the sooner we get back to work and normal, the better it is for housing. Most people do have a job to go back to, so like an office, and most people are still getting a paycheck, which is really good. The lending moving forward, banks right now, we're seeing more unique lending programs. So I say lending programs because it's not just about a rate. It's not say, hey, John's offering a 2% 5-year fixed, go use him because it's cheap money. The banks right now are developing what's called more lending programs. So if you're business for self, there is a program that you could fit into that will allow you to be approved for a mortgage, even though you may not be qualified under, we'll call normal lending guidelines. So you'll still get the same low rate, but they're offering unique lending programs to individuals, and they're rolling out more new programs, I feel like every day. Like Scotiabank, a new, what's called almost like a net worth program, whereas if you had a little bit more liquid cash or liquid equity within your house, that you could qualify for a mortgage easier, just because you have a little bit more assets to back you. So there's less risk to the bank, and the bank is willing to provide you with a mortgage. Some banks, however, have said if you have a HELOC, so a line of credit that's attached to your property, you can't purchase an investment property with those funds, right? So they're really trying to, some banks are really trying to say, hey, if you'd like to purchase a rental property, you can't use the home equity line of credit in your property to purchase it. However, there is a workaround and a solution to that. Like I said, we're expected to see lower rates expected soon. We're sort of thinking in the next 2-ish months. and will maintain low rates for the foreseeable future. Why do I think that? I think any good mortgage broker will look at the bond market daily. I look at it, I think, 3 times a day. The VIX it's like a fear index. So it basically tells investors what the confidence level is with public investing. So that was at an all-time high mid-March when COVID started, or COVID first started in Canada, I want to say, and and the confidence has slowly come back to consumers. So more people are investing. The CDOR and the CORRA, those are two indicators. Those are two indicators for variable rate holders. So a lot of people are pro-variable as opposed to pro-fixed rate. So we look at those graphs to see, hey, is variable going to be offer a very low rate for a long time? And so we have these consultations with clients and say, this is what data tells us, and we advise clients accordingly. And a lot more banks in the last 2 weeks have started offering, hey, if you do business with me, we will give you cash, $500, $1,000, $2,500. And this is really good for those people that are separating and divorcing, because sometimes there is a mortgage penalty. Sometimes there is an unexpected cost. Sometimes people just want free money. And so we say, okay, here's a mortgage, here's a rate, here's a cashback offer that you can have with the bank. However, certain cashback offers are better than others. If you break your mortgage, let's say you get a 5-year fixed, and let's say they give you $1,000 as an example. If you break your mortgage, you need to pay back that $1,000. Not only do you need to pay back that $1,000, there's going to be a mortgage penalty, and you need to pay back that $1,000. So it's really important that any mortgage professional that you work with or you refer to explains that to your client, because not everyone does. And when they break their mortgage, they're like, oh, I remember that $1,000, or I don't remember that cashback offer. Now you have to pay it back, especially when people are separating and divorcing. If they got a cashback offer, say 5 or 10 years ago, or however many years ago when they first got together, when they were in love, it's also important to look and say, hey, there was a cashback offer, now you have to pay this. Now, are they splitting it 50-50? Is she keeping the house and assuming the mortgage, and is she on the hook for this, or is he on the hook for this? How are we going to move forward with this problem? So that's something to understand. My last slide is broker versus bank and who to use. First and foremost, I always say, partner or use the representative you feel most comfortable with. That's the most important thing. You can't force someone to fall in love with you. We all know this. So I'm obviously pro broker because I'm a mortgage broker. Many moons ago, I was a banker, so I was pro banker. So there's a reason why I've moved over to the other side. And I feel I'm more neutral than anything else, because I'm more client focused. I know what the bank is going on, but my allegiance is always to my clients. So people say, oh, you're a mortgage broker, there's fees and all that stuff. Very rare does a mortgage broker charge fees. Do they? Yes, probably in about 5 to 10% of circumstances. So we represent the clients, whereas the banker is representing the bank, not representing the person walking in the door. So really that person is self-represented. And for those of you that are mediators and lawyers and have dealt with a self-represented client, the knowledge really isn't there. And I'm sure most of you can understand this. That's how it is walking into a bank. You're walking in blind and you think that your banker is there for you. The banker is there for their shareholders. That's why I always say, and this isn't investing advice, but always buy bank stock. Don't necessarily do business with the bank by yourself. Do business with the bank with a mortgage broker. Brokers always provide the bank option, all bank options, and more options, and present them to clients, and then the client can figure out what's best for him or her based on recommendations. Brokers are all solution focused. We're highly regulated, fully licensed, and me, myself, I have an expertise in something called separation mortgages. That is the service that I run for people that are separating and divorcing. Whereas on the bank side, quite often they need a signed agreement. They're not willing to help people that are in the midst of a separation. And that's really where the main differences are, especially now with COVID. What ended up happening was when those deferral payments were being offered, there was like an 8-hour on hold period to get your deferrals, right? So what my clients did, instead of calling the bank, they just called us, and we helped them facilitate and get almost front of the line access in order to get those deferrals. And now most of the banks, if not all of the banks, you can now do this all online. But for that first 2-3 week period, it was all telephone, and the frustration added in was on the forefront for a lot of people. So they called us, and we helped them navigate through the difficult or the more difficult times, I should say. And then this is me again. And then if you guys have questions, I'm here to answer them for you.
Nice. Thanks, John.
Yeah, bro.
So Simon will send me the questions. And in the meantime, I had a question about the deferral. At the very beginning of all this, I had one client who, she was a banker herself, and she was applying for the deferral, but she said that she had to, this is what she said in the mediation, that they actually had to requalify to get the deferral. I just was watching that happen. Is that true? He had to requalify?
I don't think so. So imagine 70 different banks, or however different many banks there are in the country, right? Most of us know 6, right? The big 6, as they're probably on every corner in every major city. Yeah. Most times you're calling a call center, right? You're calling a call center, someone somewhere, and that person is probably not trained very well. The deferral itself should be, and what for the majority of cases, and I'm not saying the one-offs did not exist, should have been, hey, I'm laid off, or I have a job loss, or whatever. I don't think I have clients who didn't have so many questions. It was like, hey, can I get a deferral? And they were like, how many months would you like? It really should be just that easy, right?
That's good to know. That's good to know. I think that, that I had only heard of that one person, and I hadn't heard of anyone else applying for that. So it should be just, and I've now heard that the benefits online are easy to apply for, like the CERB benefit. There's a new student benefit, I think, coming out, but that those are fairly easy to apply for. So this, and your experience has been pretty easy, other than the initial 8-hour waiting period where you're listening to terrible music.
Right. And obviously it's new, right? So, they were offering something really, and they still are offering something really amazing, right? But were they equipped for all those calls? I don't think anyone was. I don't know if anyone was anticipating 600,000 people calling, right? Yeah. But it happened, and they were serviced. Yeah, it took some time. I'm sure people are still on hold, unfortunately, but now things are a little bit more online. I think there's even less questions. But what that did was that put a lot of the banks at a very risk position. So what we also saw at the same time, as variable rates or the overnight lending rate was decreasing and prime was decreasing, we saw fixed rates jump, right, for a short period of time. Now they're slowly trickling down again to what's called normal levels. I think they've always been sub 3%, but they will continue to decrease. So for those of you that are still in need of it, always a good idea, if you need it, to apply for it. If you don't need it, then just pay your mortgages.
Yeah. There's a question, is this the case when you defer a mortgage that is there interest paid on interest? I guess the deferral of interest, does it just get added on as principal?
So every bank has a different method on how they handle the deferral. So there's no blanket answer.
Darn.
Right, I know. Most times, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, John owes $1,000 on his mortgage. They'll still keep adding the interest on to what's owed, right? But then they should, not always the case, but they should, sort of tack that interest on to the balance owing.
Okay.
And then your payment should stay the same, but that is not consistent with all lenders.
Okay.
Some say, I've heard some clients have said, oh, my payment will increase by $40 for the next 6 months until sort of that deferral interest has been paid back, or however they've calculated it. It's always good to ask the representative to say, okay, I'm applying for 6 months of referral, or I'm applying for 3 months of referral. What does that look like in my payments moving forward? Does it change? Where does the interest get tacked onto, right? Because the bank is obviously going to charge you interest because they're a bank and that's how they make money. The other surprise that we'd read and we heard about was, can accepting a deferral put you in the position that your mortgage payments are not in good standing? So that was another question, right? So we always said, make sure if you're signing on the dotted line, virtually signing or saying, yes, I want a deferral, please make sure that that doesn't negatively impact your credit score, right? So we have clients who said, that was one of the first questions that they asked was, hey, my broker said, I want to make sure that my credit isn't negatively impacted because of a deferral, because deferral can also mean missed payments depending on, a lot of people are lawyers on this call, right? So, people will interpret it differently. So I don't believe that your credit score will be negatively impacted, but it's always good to double check. And I don't want to have anyone's alarm bells ringing or anything like that, but it's always, you always want to err on the side of caution.
And you mentioned 6 months. I had heard originally 4. Is it changed now? Like you can apply for up to 6, or do you have to, how many months you want?
So we were told up to 6, and then you sort of choose how many months you want. Some organizations, so I think some credit unions in the beginning were saying no deferrals, and then they offered like 2 or 3. So it's bank by bank, institution by institution,
Okay.
right? So, and we're not sure, and I'm not sure if this is off the table, it's probably not, but in August and September, so 6 months from now, or I guess now 5 months from now, are they going to be offering more deferrals? And I'm not sure, right? Yeah. And that could be, that could be one of the things that pop up, because if we're going back to work in phases, what happens if you're one of the last people to go to work, or, have your regular salary back? Right? Like, are those people, or should those people be entitled? And we're just not sure yet. And I'm sure that's on the table, just probably on the back burner, because there's 5 months, it's 5 months away. But, there's more pressing things that need to be dealt with.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that the banks didn't sort of come out with a uniform way that this is done. It doesn't make our job as mediators any easier to know like what's out there. And I think, when you're talking to clients, it's best just to ask them to get the specifics of their case. It's good to know that it's different, because I didn't know that. And you mentioned 2 things that I thought that I hadn't heard of before: the VIX, the fear index, and I think you had a few other ones, but VIX stood out for me. And then I also wanted to know why you like fixed versus variable. You mentioned that. Okay,
so fixed versus variable. So right now, so I don't prefer one over the other. I'm always a fan of short-term money. So I'm not a 5-year fixed person. Personally, no. So I believe that if the variable rate or the variable discount that is offered to clients, so prime, usually prime minus, so if it's like prime minus 1, right, which prime today is 2.45, and if you're at a prime minus 1, and a lot of our clients are right now because we've moved them into that, you're sitting at like 1.5%, right? I would take that, no problem. But my personally, for all my properties, including my owner occupied, I'm a 2-year fixed person, max.
You're fixed.
Sometimes 3 if there's that, because I like to invest through the equity of my place, but that is not for everybody, right? Keep in mind, what I do is very different. I'm more of an investor versus your everyday person. So someone that's separating and divorcing probably should not be taking my advice on on investing through their property, which is fine, right? So then we just say, okay, maybe a 3-year fix is probably best for that person. Usually if you're separating or divorcing and, you know, money can be tight, shorter term money could be a benefit, because if you need to sell after 2 or 3 years, then your mortgage penalty is much lower, right? So
that's right.
Right.
That's good advice.
Right, and a 5-year fixed with a bank today is not the greatest, because we're seeing fixed rates drop, and then it eventually will settle. So the strategy is short-term money, or even an open mortgage, until you can move your mortgage into a fixed rate a low fixed rate for the duration, for the longer term.
Good to know what you do personally, because I think sometimes that's what we want to know, what our brother would do, or our sister would do, and what advice we would give our family. So thanks for sharing that. Back to the deferral for a second. There's a question. Is it really as simple as deferring for however many months, and whatever months you don't pay are added to the mortgage? Say you have 2.5 years left on your mortgage. Do you simply owe 2.5 years of payments plus, I guess, what you didn't pay when you go back to work?
Yeah, so I believe it would be the 2.5 plus the 6.
Okay.
Right. So they're not giving you free money. Like I said, keep in mind that every institution is different, right? So, you know, common sense says that it should be you need to make up the payments that you've missed, and, you know, depending on the bank, they should just add those 6 payments, we'll call them 6 payments, to the 2.5 years that you have left. So you're now at just over or just under 3 years of payments.
Okay.
Right? If you've missed.
Is it a full relief from the entire payment, or just the interest portion? Like, do you still have to pay the principal?
So what I'm told, no, but, you know, I'm not sure if the credit union down the street is saying, hey, just give me the interest, right? I believe it is there's no payments for up to 6 months, and there will be interest charged on what you've deferred, and that all should be added to the back end. However, some institutions are saying, you know what, come September 1st, you'll owe your regular payment plus the interest that accrued over the last 6 months. So your payment might go up by, you know, $100 or however much to that payment, and then you'll have a slightly higher payment for the next 6 months, and then you're back to sort of normal payment. But every institution is different, which adds to the confusion, which brings me back to my last slide. You should always use a licensed representative who can walk you through various solutions.
I think it's good when you think about the analogy of being self-represented at your bank. I never really thought of it that way, but can you talk a little bit more about, because the problem that we face as mediators often is that we have clients sitting in front of us, they've got a plan, we've talked through all the options, and the option is dad is going to buy mom's equity out of the home, or they're going to sell their property, and then they need a separation agreement to say, here's what's happening. And as mediators, we're writing memorandums of understanding, then we're asking for independent legal advice, and it's taking this time, is just extending over when they have a finished product in their hand versus when they're talking and agreeing to things. So you work with clients at the mediation stage, right, where there's separation agreement hasn't been signed. How do you do that, and how is it different? Like, why do the banks not do that, and how do you do it?
So this is why this service was created about 8 years ago. So a mediator friend of mine was giving me files, and this was her problem, right? And she always ran into roadblocks. So we created the service because of her problem, or the problem that she was encountering. So we essentially created a widget, which is the service. And so we talk to clients, and we'll say, okay, you're planning to buy the house, or you're planning to purchase a new property. It's one of the two, usually. Sometimes people rent, and that's okay too. But then we'll say, okay, if you're purchasing the property, what are you working towards? Are you going to be receiving child or spousal support? Great. How old are the kids? Are you going to be paying out a lump sum? What is your mortgage going to look like? So we run almost the exact same scenarios on only the mortgage and the spousal support payment area of the understanding, or the memorandum of understanding, into a mortgage application. So that's what we've created. And then we can say, okay, do we need to work with your mediator? Do we need to speak with him or her? And that's totally fine. And we'll say, this is where Mrs. Smith, as an example, this is her affordability. 400,000, she needs $1,000 a month in spousal and child support, and she'll have an approval. Through the ongoing negotiations through the mediator or lawyers or whoever, that might change. So today we have her approved at Scotia. Awesome. The terms have changed slightly. She's now receiving 800 as opposed to 1,000. She no longer qualifies at Scotia, and then we can flip her application to TD literally by hitting a button on our computer. Okay. She's always been approved. She just doesn't care which institution it is.
Right.
The only thing that really changes is the logo on her approval. Big deal.
Okay. And so banks can't do that because they don't care to, or they don't have the flexibility to get another set of criteria for eligibility.
There's no money. There's no money in service.
Okay.
Right? So is really what it boils down to. Yeah. Plus, banks have, I feel like they're always, and this isn't bank bashing, right? Like, I love the banks, but the banks, I feel, are always too busy. One person is doing the job of 5, right? And what ends up happening is they don't understand this area very well. And so they're like, just come in when you have a signed agreement and we will just figure it out. And I think that's too late, right? Because people need to know what their cash flow situation is going to be.
I find a lot of clients, when they're separating, they're asking for permission from a lot of people. So they're asking for permission. Can I see my kids on a Sunday night as well, even if I have week on, week off? And I always like to say you're still, as long as you haven't put decision making into another person's authority, so you haven't given it away by entering into binding arbitration, or you're in a court hearing and you've given up decision making, I think that people should be empowered to make their own choices. And I often hear from my clients that their bank has said, oh, you can't get a mortgage without a signed separation agreement, as if it's against the law. Is that true, or I'm hearing from you that's not true?
It's not true. So there's no rule and there's no law that says that you need a signed separation agreement to do anything, right? So there are some bank policies that say that you need a signed separation agreement, and you need a signed separation agreement that has independent legal advice attached to that.
Yeah.
Right? There are some lending institutions that say, okay, you don't have a signed agreement because your ex-husband's a jerk and he wants to hold this over your head for whatever reason. We've talked about power imbalance. So, and this happens, and I'm sure everyone on the call is like, yes, I've been in that situation 10 times. And all Mrs. Smith wants to do is just leave her ex-husband, and so she can do whatever she wants. There are some banks that will sign a statutory declaration or allow their clients to sign a statutory declaration that says, guess what? I'm in the middle of a separation, and I don't owe him any spousal support or child support. Sign here. Here's your mortgage. It's with an A bank, and off you go. And then usually what ends up happening is, as soon as Mrs. Smith has moved on, Mr. Smith now wants to sign the separation agreement because there's nothing for him to hold over her head. Okay. So this is where we come into play. Is the answer is yes. What's the problem that we need to solve? And and that's what we are. We're problem solvers. Just like you're a problem solver, Jody and Janet are problem solvers. We're all here to solve a problem that people have, and in order to put clients and people in the best possible position.
And I really think the more we work together, like that we use each other for your expertise, I think that's can be super helpful, right? When you're trying to get something done, like as a mediator, I don't have to know everything. I can call you, John, or I can call you, Jody and Janet, and say, what do I need to know? I think the first question I asked to Jody and Janet was, is it an essential service? And they reassured me, yes, it is. Good to know, right? But I don't have to read the legislation to look for that, to understand it. As a group, we can work together, which I think is something I'm always sort of encouraging, because I think we are, our standards of practice at OAFM say that we can only practice in the area of our own expertise. And a final question, I know we're getting to 2, but just a quick one. Do you need a signed separation agreement to rename the title of the house? I think it would have to be a direction in at least a memoranda, wouldn't it, to change title?
So as long as, so you don't need to sign, I would need more detail, but probably not, right? It really just depends. You know, sometimes all you need is two cooperating people that are willing to sign off on stuff, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes there's no signed separation agreement, but the people are still getting along, right?
Yeah.
And they both want to move on. They just haven't agreed on the terms. And yes, Mrs. Smith can keep the house, and you know the kids are in the same school district. There's less impact to the kids' mental health. You know, the kids are all in the same neighborhood. As long as he is willing to sign off in that specific situation, and a lot of people are, totally fine. However, right, you know, we also, you know, if I'm staying neutral, I want to also protect Mr. Smith. And if he's signing off the house and there's no signed agreement, you know, we also want to protect his interest in the property, that he's going to get what he's owed if there's something that's owed. So maybe you do a two-part separation agreement where, okay, we've decided what's going to happen with the house. Now we're just going to, and we can sign off on that. And now we're going to figure out what's going to happen with this. We'll call it the spousal support payments or the child support payments, and figure out this way. So at least people can leave the matrimonial home alone. You can stop bickering or whatever separating couples do, right? And they don't all bicker, it's whatever, and then they can move on. We've seen those before also.
So a partial agreement.
I think, exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with bringing the right professionals in, right? Even before COVID, I've always been virtual. Very few people come to my office, and if they want to, that's awesome. But it's Zoom calls. It's always been the telephone, you know, and more we're part of ongoing mediation calls, and people just want to figure out, hey, you know, the banker's not picking up. John, I have a question. Can I book you in for 15 minutes at 1 o'clock? No problem, right? Like, we're here really to help as many people as possible, to give them honest feedback that we would just give our own moms, right?
Nice.
So that's what we're
That's good. Okay, thanks so much, you guys. I know it 2 o'clock came super fast, and I really appreciate you taking the time, Jody and Janet and John. Derry's asking a question, what are the rates? I think what I'll do is say, everyone who's watching, if you can send me an email to ask me for any questions, I can forward them on to John, or Jody or Janet. Just give me your permission to forward your email. So if you email me directly,
sure.
you also see John's email there, and Jody and Janet can be contacted at thompsoncells.com, right, you guys?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It was great to see you and shake your hand. Virtual everything's, but yeah, I can't wait to see you all again in person. And thank you so much. And thanks to Simon for moderating. And we'll see you all again tomorrow. There's Law Pro switching to online services and minimizing your harm. So that's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. All right. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You